Hey guys, it's Drunken Master 226 with another installment of the Fighting Gem series. But before I begin, I'd like to say something about the series as a whole. So to save you some time, I'll try and summarize the game in one sentence. Granted, the sentence is pretty long, but if you don't like the sound of it, feel free to go about your business. Consider it an apology of sorts. Here goes. A shout out to the super robot genre where two robots beat the slag out of each other until one blowjob dash. And did I mention that Bloodia and Jin Santome are in this game? And that it's freaking awesome? If you like that description, you'll love Tech Romancer. Yeah, I said Tech Romancer. Yes, I know that the translation switched the title for no reason, but that's not important right now. Maybe I'll deal with it later. Tech Romancer is a straight-out 3D fighter where two giant robots battle in all sorts of different environments. The concept behind the game is pretty cool. Design a bunch of different character designs and model them after every archetype of the giant monster mash that you can think of. As such, each character represents a different staple of the genre. For example, Kikai-o is basically a family friend in Mazinger Z, and his pilot Junpei is hot-blooded shonen justice personified. Diana 17 is a female mecha, no breast missiles though, boo, and her pilot is the typically competent, stubborn, and underpowered female lead, Raika. Pulsion is awfully similar to Ultraman Ace, what with the male and female symbioses. Really, the list goes on and on. It's like a who's who of Daikaiju and Mechensai. If imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, then Tech Romancer is Capcom's tawdry love letter to the super robot genre. But underneath this game's parody trappings lies a solid fighting game. The game controls are sort of like a patchwork system. Each part of the controls are simple, but when combined they form a slew of options which can be downright overwhelming at times. For starters, each robot has 4 different categories of attacks on their own. There are basic attacks, which are the robot's basic attack and their basic combination attack. The dynamic attack, which are like special moves. The special attack, which is their super, and unique moves, which add some variety to the fight. The weird thing about these moves is their universality. Aside from the extra moves, which are unique to each character, most of these moves are performed the same way. Supers are always back forward AB or forward back AB, AB attacks are usually beam attacks, etc, etc. But each move has its own place, and you'll have to keep switching between them to avoid becoming predictable. And that's not all. In addition to each robot's individual move list, each fighter can easily sidestep by pressing up or down, since jumping and guarding are mapped to different buttons. There are also dodge attacks that can be used to dodge attacks, hence the name, and then send the opponent flying. Then there's a steel dash, which acts as a one-hit stun, and a power break, which is sort of like a grapple stun, which is, I don't think I've ever seen that before. In addition, items can be picked up by either knocking them out of your opponent or picking them up from the rubble of the stage that you're destroying as you fight. And each item transforms to fit the robot that uses it. For example, if there's a projectile item on the ground and one person picks it up, they might get a feudal era cannon, whereas if the other person had picked it up, they'd get a giant rock. And there are special items which activate the robot's hero mode. This hero mode gives the player special abilities for a limited amount of time. Like one character who can actually make a colony drop from space. And to top it all off, there is a final attack. If one robot is at his last down, or loss, and their health is at 50%, his opponent can use a final attack and finish the match in one spectacular blow. But these attacks can only be used once, and most of them have huge startup and recovery time. You can even break your opponent's armor, which effectively doubles the damage you deal and makes them vulnerable to all sorts of moves. Seeing as how the robots use their armor to block attacks, a robot without armor is essentially a sitting duck. So you've got all different sorts of ways to attack the guy that you're trying to take out. You could really kind of rare in this genre since most of the time you only have one way to play one character, no questions. Like in any other fighting game, you play Ryu as Ryu, fireball traps, sure you can, etc, etc, but you've got a whole bunch of different options here. It can be a bit disorienting, and unless you're a dedicated arcade stick user, it's somewhat difficult to input all of these different items on the Dreamcast pad. Although it would be right at home on a DualShock controller, Capcom, hint, hint, I would suggest playing around with the controls until you find a configuration that fits your playstyle. Unfortunately, there is no training mode, so if you don't have any fighting savvy friends nearby, you'll either be tussling with the controls and the CPU at once, or playing one-handed by yourself in all the wrong ways. But really, one of the worst complaints a guy like me can levy against a game like this is that there are too many ways to attack. I think the fans of the game can take criticisms like this in stride. To my knowledge, there is no game quite like Techromancer. And although I'm not a betting man, if there had to be a list of the greatest mecha fighting games of all time, this game would probably be lumped together with Armored Warriors and Cyberbot's Full Metal Madness as a trifecta and take the top spot as a trilogy. Oh, speaking of which, you can unlock Bloodia and Jin Santome in this game. I love the other guys, don't get me wrong, but when I got Bloodia, I just stopped using them. I don't know if it's the mecha fan in me who loves how much its right arm looks like heavy arms Gatling gun / gauntlet, or the fighting game fan who just loves kicking ass as Jin, but either way, I main Bloodia and I am invincible. But that's just me. Don't let my fanboyism bring down the game. I'm trying to speak professionally here. So, I've been working these past couple of weeks on a bunch of new games, and this is just the first of them. Expect another edition of Fighting Gems real soon if fate doesn't try and screw me over again. Here's a hint.